I'm Laura Hall with Acousticity Radio Show at KWCW Radio in Walla Walla, Washington at Whitman College. And I'm speaking with Karen Walwyn, a pianist and composer who played with the Walla Walla Symphony 2 nights ago. And she's gracious enough to find time in her busy schedule today to talk with me a few minutes. So tell me about your Steinway artist recognition.
Well, I was approached by one of the Steinway representatives back in 2014, and one thing led to another, and I was awarded one of the Steinway Artist Awards.
Great.
And I came to know that I was the first African American female composer slash pianist to receive this honor.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
I
How long ago was that?
That was in 2014.
Okay.
It's a process that I wouldn't have known about, but it goes from local to state to regional to international over to Germany, and finally they make their announcements from New York.
Great.
Yes.
And that's where you're from originally, right?
I'm originally from New York.
And living
Queens.
Okay. And you're now living in.
I'm living in Rockville, Maryland, which is just 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. I
Okay.
teach at Howard University.
Okay. And you have students online, I'm sure, everywhere.
I have, I teach privately as well as, of course, on campus at Howard. So my private students range in levels and ages, and teaching is one of my occupations that first keeps me fresh with what I need to be doing at the piano myself, and keeps me in touch with the outside world.
Wonderful. And you just did a master class here at Whitman College last night, right?
I did a master class yesterday with the pianist here at Whitman, and I had a really amazing time because what every one of the students brought to the piano was just a beautiful sense of musicality and sincerity. And it was so much fun to work with them because they were very open, and they didn't pass out at some of the things that I asked them to do, and they didn't get too angry, but they responded quite nicely.
Great. How many were in your class?
6 pianists played, and then today I had a music history class session, and so I got a chance to meet a number of the students here, and we talked about a lot of things, including Florence Price. We talked about some of the hardships of an African American female growing up during the times of the turn of the century, and coming from Little Rock, Arkansas, and what does that mean for a composer back then? What does it mean for her? What does it mean for her music? How is her music shaped? And how does it relate to today? So we touched upon a lot of subjects that perhaps we don't often get a chance to open up and unpackage.
Okay. So the Florence Price piece, that's not easy to say, that you played with our symphony, Walla Walla Symphony, was the
Concerto 1 movement
in D minor, right?
In D minor, yes.
That was amazing. That was so beautiful.
It's an incredible work, and what's exciting about the concerto in this moment is that from the first time when I performed it and premiered it, I had the opportunity and the honor to premiere it back in 2010. That was with the new Black Music Repertory Ensemble. Did I get that right? Black Music Repertory Ensemble in Chicago.
Okay.
I got a phone call from the Center for Black Music Research, and they asked me if I would be interested in learning the concerto, which was just recently reconstructed, orchestrated by composer Trevor Weston, because the original Florence Price orchestration was not yet found. And so, upon learning this, I received the music, and we did a performance of it in 2010, and then we went straight into the recording of it. And so that CD came out, and along with that was the E minor Symphony Orchestra by Florence Price. And so it's been circulating, around the world, and it was the introduction to Florence Price, if you will.
Oh, nice.
And so now, this past September, the Arkansas Symphony Orchestra and I recorded the Florence Price Concerto, but with the newly discovered orchestration by Florence Price. And so we did that recording. So I am honored again to have been a part of the premiere recording of the concerto. And so that's going to be released on April 3rd, right around the corner. And so that's a very exciting moment. You'll find information on my Florence Price website, florenceprice.net.
Oh, my.
And so you can click on performances, and then there'll be a drop down, and you can see Arkansas Symphony Orchestra. Click on it, and it'll take you to the announcement.
Okay.
And so that's really huge, because the orchestration showed up, and Shermer purchased the score, and so it's with Shermer, the official documents, so that if anyone needs to, that's where you would acquire the score for
Okay.
performance. I wish I could tell you where it was. I don't know.
Okay.
But that leads to a subject of the music that was discovered at her home, her abandoned home, in 2006. And so this would be the perhaps 2/3 of her music. It was known that there was some music. There was much more music than what was at hand, from the time that she died in 1953 until 2006. But no one knew where it was. And so when it was finally discovered, the couple that purchased the property would eventually sell the music, the scores, to the University of Arkansas Special Collections. And so that's where you can go to visit and see the actual scores and letters that Florence Price wrote. And having had a chance to visit the library, it's just amazing to see all of the work that she did. She did a lot of work as far as being her own agent, writing to conductors and asking and sending her scores repeatedly, asking for them to consider her music. And to one conductor in particular, Acousticity, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, she wrote 6 letters and saying things, just discussing, I have some black blood in my race. I am a woman. However, my music is strong. And on many, many, many reiterations of that alone, you see it persistent. And she didn't give up. And I admire that. This is coming from a woman that at the same time, she's doing everything that she can to provide for her daughters. Because at this point, in the 1930s, she's divorced from her first husband after they leave Little Rock. They left Little Rock because of the unfortunate lynching of John Carter. That lynching happened right outside of the office of her husband's law practice.
Oh, my goodness.
And only a half a mile from their home. So once they gathered their personal belongings and left, went to Chicago, and unfortunately, with the starting a new career, him trying to start work, things were very, 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 very difficult. And so there was a divorce, a very tumultuous divorce, um, very traumatic. Um, she's still able to write. She's writing this beautiful music. She's winning competitions. You know, for those that don't know, what brought Florence Price's name to the forefront at this point in time is that she was the first prize winner of the Wanamaker composition competition. And as a result, her symphony was performed with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, making her the first female African American composer to be performed by a national symphony orchestra. And so that would open the doors to a lot of performances of her music in Chicago. And at the same time, she was teaching, she was playing organ for silent movies, and writing. And so she was at times going from home to home. Once she lived with her own student, Margaret Bonds, who would become a great champion of her music. But it was quite a challenging period in her life, but yet the most prolific time of composition. It's amazing.
Sometimes adversity brings out the creative juices.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What I love about her music is that each piece you hear a story, and whether it's titled In the Land of Cotton Sweet, right away thoughts come to mind, what period of time in history that she may be referring to. But then there are other titles like Down a Southern Lane, or The Rocking Chair, or Dark Pool. So many what we call common places or points in our daily lives. She creates this beautiful story. And inside of that, you hear the characteristics of spirituals, slave songs. You hear rhythms from the juba, which is an African dance brought here to the United States. You hear ragtime, jazz-like harmonies and rhythms, but then you hear this inside of the European structure. So in her preludes, you hear your theme that is spun in the similar way that Chopin had in his preludes. You hear in the sonata in E minor, big, gigantic work. I'm reminded of the Chopin B minor sonata. Very, very virtuosic, demanding, yet melodic, and very intimate. In particular, in the second movement, it's very soulful. Almost makes you feel like you're suddenly in church, listening to the choir sing. Her range is incredible. I'm reminded of composers such as Schumann, Schubert, Chopin, the lyricism of those composers. I'm reminded of the big octave arpeggiated scalar writings of Liszt and Tchaikovsky. The rhythms, lots of listeners will come up and say, do you think that she heard Gershwin? Do you think Gershwin heard Price? I don't know. But they were writing around similar times. But I cannot say who may have heard who. But you hear all of this in her writing, and it's what probably makes her specific and identifiable.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, many times I'll hear something, well, it sounds like Price, and they'll say Florence Price. So it's quite an amazing time, and so amazing. I'm excited to say that for her birthday coming up on April 9, I am going to release a solo album of Florence Price. And on it, you'll hear In the Land of Cotton Sweet, um, the Five Preludes, a short little, very, very whimsical piece,
Mm-hmm.
Joy in June, Arkansas Jitter, which is probably the one you'll tap your foot to the most, um, Child Asleep,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Sonata in E minor. So I'm really excited about this, and also because almost all of these pieces, except for the Sonata, will be world premiere recordings. So I look forward to the day of the release and to be able to share this music.
Do you want me to play that Land of Cotton?
Yeah.
Right now?
Sure. Let's hear the first, which is At the Cotton Gin.
So I have the
Yes.
hit and play. Wonderful.
Thank you.
And of course, that's you playing.
Yes. I fell in love with this piece when Dr. James Greason from the University of Arkansas invited me to be a part of his documentary on Florence Price, The Caged Bird. And this was the first piece that I had um, the opportunity to hear or read, learn music of Price that wasn't on a big scale.
Mm-hmm.
The concerto is mammoth compared to this delicate, intricate, intimate piece. And so it's here that I really started to see the amazing breadth of her writing and the scope and how um, the colors, the infinite colors in which she brings to the score. That title in the Lana Cotton Suite, it suggests to me a little bit of her history because when she used to walk to school, she would walk by a cotton factory. So it's something that, as I start to look at many of the titles I'm seeing, she's sharing her history. And I say that a few times repeatedly because this is an African American female composer that during the time of the turn of the century, when life shifted for the African American, when her father moved to Little Rock as a
Mm-hmm.
dentist, well, he moved to Little Rock at the same time when many other very educated black men and women would move to Little Rock because that's where they could prosper. That's where they could build neighborhoods and homes and have businesses and live well.
Mm-hmm.
Florence Price's parents lived in a beautiful home. They had a beautiful piano. They had a beautiful salon. They had a house big enough to accommodate guests who would come out from out of town because at the time, African Americans could not stay in the hotels. And so they had to stay. They were able to stay with a family like Florence Price.
Nice.
And so Florence Price grew up in this beautiful environment, not too far away from William Grant Still, as a matter of fact. But when she would return from NEC, New England Conservatory, somewhere in the late teens, between 1906 to 1920, was the change. Jim Crow laws set in. And
then what?
Jim Crow,
Jim Crow okay.
laws set in. And so what did that do for a family like Florence Price? Unfortunately, because her father's clientele was mostly white, they were no longer able to go to the black dentist. He lost his business because most of the black clientele did not pay in cash. They paid by barter exchange. And so equally, Florence's mother, who was a businesswoman in her own right and owned property, lost her property with the change. And so unfortunately, her father passed, and when he died penniless. And her mother, who was very, very fair-skinned, she made a decision, and it was a hard decision, I'm sure, but she decided to leave Little Rock. She left her daughter, young 20s, and slipped into white society, never to be heard of from as far as we know. Again. So this is a young lady who's lost essentially both her parents and her brother, who in the biography written by Dr. Raylinda Brown, there's no reference to where her brother may have gone. It's assumed perhaps he slipped into white society as well, because the decision to survive in that way was better than what was happening in that moment.
Right.
And so Florence, who also was quite fair-skinned, going back to when she was at New England Conservatory, her mother tried to insist that she identify as Mexican or other, just so that she could be protected. But in the writing of Florence Price, you hear references to spirituals. You hear as I mentioned earlier, you hear the rhythms from the juba, from the ragtime, from jazz, from you hear the harmonic language from the spirituals. For example, the falling fourth, the falling third is typical in spiritual melodic language, and you hear that throughout. If you play the second movement of the sonata, a little bit of the second movement, you'll hear that, and you almost assume that you are sitting in a church listening to a beautiful choir sing. So she's not hiding her heritage at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes strength.
It does, great strength.
That takes a lot of strength. At the possibility of isolation from her entire family.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that during this time, the 1930s and 40s and 50s, there were a lot of blacks who did not want to be reminded of those hard days just less than 100 years before.
Looking forward.
Right. So they don't want to hear spirituals. They don't want to hear references to anything from that period of time. Therefore, they don't want to necessarily all hear Florence Price, because she's not quoting, but it's like, very much like the characteristics of those types of idioms that represent the African American heritage. So Florence Price is in a very small, isolated place. Family is not necessarily around. She was associated with the National Association of Negro Musicians. And in fact, there's a school in Chicago that's named after her, an elementary school that's named after her. But probably the largest of her support would be whites, in particular white women. She was a part of a number of music associations in Chicago, which helped promote her music, gave her more opportunities of performances. But to have music that literally, in my opinion, paints her life story is brave. And as you heard, so beautifully and eloquently composed, in my opinion, here anything other than just delight and and beauty.
Very positive.
Yes.
The piece you played of hers at the Symphony the other night, of course, it was D minor and sounded very dark in places.
So I agree. In the height of the first part, it's a concerto in one movement, but for convenience, I say first movement, second movement, third movement. But it's inside of that first part where it escalates and has this big tumultuous climatic moment. Yeah, that's where I'm feeling the intensity of some portions of life in its raw moments. Then you have this beautiful, sublime second movement. It's like, wow, where did that come from? And it's like looking up into the sky and seeing a beautiful rainbow with all of the shimmering colors and just peaceful, very transparent. And the more time that I take, the more I hear. and hope that I bring that beauty to the performance. And then, of course, the last movement, the typical Florence Price last movement, Juba, is fanciful and fun and very exciting. So it's a full life cycle.
Right. There's so much different flavor and texture throughout that
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
It was very nice for the audience to hear, even if it's general public who
Sure.
don't often go to a symphony.
Right. That's what's amazing about Florence Price.
Right.
You can hum her tunes on probably every concert. As I'm leaving, I'll hear somebody, I'll hear that, and that's nice to be a part of that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming to Walla Walla.
Oh, it was my honor and pleasure. I had a beautiful time and good restaurants.
Oh, El Sombrero, yes. That's where we became acquainted.
That's right.
The after concert dinner that the symphony musicians always go to, and with the guests usually. Yeah, it was very good food.
Yeah.
So, on to anything else you want to say about Florence Price before we get off that subject?
I'm excited about her upcoming birthday, so I just want to say as a reminder, April 9, visit my website, KarenWalwyn.com.
WALWYN. I always I want to put a D on the end.
Oh, because like Baldwin.
Right.
Yeah, it's not like Baldwin.
Yeah.
And you'll see the information for the solo CD, and again, many of the pieces are world premiere recordings, and the sonata is the final work, which has been recorded by Althea Waits, which is the first time that I got to hear the sonata, which I am very happy to have had that recording by her.
Can people can people pre-order the CD?
You can certainly do one of two things. The website should be up and ready inside of the next 3 days, but if all fails, send me an email. It's drkwalwyn@gmail.com. drkwalwyn@gmail.com. And I have physical CDs as well as digital downloads.
Great. I think I will be ordering the CD. I love having a CD in my hand. If I'm on air,
right?
You can just look up what everybody else would see if they had the CD in their hand. I love that, rather than jump back and forth between the laptop and the board. And
right.
Do you want to play anything else that you sent me?
I'd love to play a little bit of the last movement of the Price Sonata.
You might want to look at it here, see which one.
Okay, so if you click on this one, Sonata Wave. And if you advance to, let's see, 23. Okay, click there. Let's see what happens.
22?
Mm-hmm. Okay, back up just about 30 seconds.
Right there?